The day my wife died, the world didn't stop. It should have. It felt like it should have cracked in half, like the sky should have fallen, like time itself should have paused out of respect. But it didn't. Cars still passed, shops still opened, bills still arrived. And debts especially didn't care that she was gone. Her name was Ariba. She was 34 when a drunk driver ran a red light and turned her small blue car into twisted metal. I wasn't with her. I was at work, arguing with a client about a delayed shipment. I remember being annoyed, tapping my pen, thinking about how hungry I was. Then my phone rang. 5 minutes later, my life was no longer divided into before lunch and after lunch. It was divided into before Ariba and after Ariba. We had been married for 7 years, no children yet. We kept saying next year, inshallah, next year when things settle. Things never settled. They just piled up: work stress, family expectations, and, as I discovered after her death, loans. I thought I knew everything about my wife. I knew how she liked her tea, strong, no sugar. I knew she slept on the edge of the bed as if always ready to get up and run. I knew she hummed old songs while cooking and that she cried during commercials about family reunions. What I didn't know was how much money she owed. The letters started coming a month after the funeral. At first, I thought they were mistakes: credit cards, personal loans, installments from places I'd never heard of. When I added them all up, my hands started shaking. She had taken loans for her mother's medical treatment, for her younger brother's education, for a failed small business venture she never told me about because she didn't want to burden me. That was Ariba. She carried the weight of the world quietly, smiling so no one would notice her back was breaking. Legally, some of the debt didn't have to be mine, but morally, emotionally, I couldn't let her name be remembered with unpaid dues. I couldn't let people say she died and left chaos behind. So I paid. Month after month, year after year. I sold my car and took the bus. I moved from our apartment to a smaller one. I stopped buying new clothes, stopped going out, stopped living in any way that felt like enjoyment. Every rupee went to clearing her name. 5 years passed like that. The apartment I lived in now was in an old building, the kind where the walls are thin and the neighbors know your routine better than your friends do. The man next door was an elderly widower named Mr. Farouk. Quiet, kind, always watering his plants at sunset. We exchanged greetings, nothing more. One evening, as I was unlocking my door, he said, "Beta, can I talk to you for a moment?" There was something strange in his voice, not panic but concern. "Of course," I said. He hesitated, then leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Have you checked your security camera lately?" I frowned. "Camera? The one on your balcony? You installed it 2 years ago, no?" I nodded slowly. After a break-in attempt in the building, I had installed a small camera facing the corridor and part of the shared parking area. "I don't check it often," I said. "Why?" He swallowed. "You should check the footage from last night." A cold line ran down my spine. Did something happen? He shook his head, but his eyes were troubled. "Just check it." That night, I sat in the dark with my laptop, opening the camera app. The familiar grainy view of the corridor appeared. I scrolled back to the previous evening. At 11:43 p.m., the motion sensor had activated. At first, I saw nothing unusual. The corridor was empty. Then, a figure appeared from the stairwell. A woman. She was wearing a long shawl pulled low over her head. She walked slowly, almost cautiously, and stopped in front of my door. My heart started beating faster. She looked around, then reached into her bag and took out something, an envelope. She slid it under my door. Before leaving, she paused just for a second, and in that second she lifted her face slightly. The image was blurry, the light was poor. But the shape of her face, the way she held her head, the familiar curve of her cheekbones. It felt like someone had punched the air out of my lungs. I whispered, "No, that's not possible." My mind screamed that it was impossible. My heart whispered something else. With shaking hands, I went to the door and opened it. The corridor was empty, silent. But on the floor was an envelope. I picked it up like it might burn me. Inside was cash. A lot of cash. And a folded piece of paper. My name was written on it, in her handwriting. I knew her handwriting the way you know the face of someone you love in a crowd. Even after 5 years, even after thousands of documents and receipts, I would recognize it anywhere. The note said, "I'm sorry I let you carry this alone. You were never meant to." I sat on the floor and cried like I hadn't cried since the day they lowered her into the ground. The next day, I went to Mr. Farouk. "Did you see her face?" I asked. He nodded slowly, not clearly, "But she looked like your late wife." The words felt unreal, like lines from a badly written drama. Over the next weeks, it happened again, always late at night, always the same woman, always an envelope with cash, no knocking, no confrontation, just a silent visit and a note. Each time the messages were gentle, apologetic, full of love. "Please stop punishing yourself for my mistakes. You did enough, let me help now. You deserve rest too." I felt like I was losing my mind. Finally, I did what I should have done earlier. I took the footage to the police. They investigated, tracked the timing, the angle, the entry points. After days of checking, one officer sat me down. "Sir," he said carefully, "the woman is not your wife, but she looks remarkably like her. They found her. Her name was Zara. She was Ariba's cousin, younger by a few years, estranged from the family. I had met her once briefly at a wedding years ago. I barely remembered her. She confessed everything. After Ariba's death, Zara had discovered the extent of the debts. She had also discovered something else. Ariba had left behind a small, secret savings account built from tiny amounts she had saved over years, planning to give it to me as a surprise for our future child. Zora had access to that account. She had watched me from a distance, seen how I was selling my belongings, how I was shrinking my life to pay for a woman who was no longer there to defend herself. "I couldn't tell you directly," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You would have refused. You're too proud, too loyal, so I became a ghost, someone you couldn't argue with." "Why the disguise?" I asked. She looked down, "So you would listen to your heart instead of your ego." The money she had been giving me was from that account, plus her own savings. She wasn't trying to pretend to be Ariba. She was trying to let Ariba's love reach me in a way I would accept. When I went home that day, I watched the footage again. This time I didn't see a ghost. I saw a woman carrying the last unfinished promise of someone I loved. I used the money to clear the remaining debt. For the first time in 5 years, I was free. Not just financially, emotionally. I stood on my balcony that evening, watching the sun sink between buildings, and whispered, "I carried it, Ariba, but you never really left me alone with it, did you?" The world still didn't stop. But for the first time in a long time, it felt like it finally let me breathe.